cpr@wsu.edu.
Clearing Sky.
This old pile of bricks heats up. It's hard to shut her down.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the July 28 meeting of the City of Moscow City Council Public Works Finance Committee. The first item on the agenda today is the approval of the July 14 minutes.
They look good to me. I like them as well.
Okay, we'll consider them approved. Stephanie? Number 2, Nicole Baker is going to come talk to us about the Conservation, Public Information, and Education contract. And I think we're fixing to hear that this is a renewal, as we have heard in the past every year.
Yes, sir. So we are increasing or asking to increase the amount of the budget for this particular contract to over about $2,200 or so. The reason for the increase is we did some supplemental extra classroom visits last fiscal year, and they were quite successful, so we wanted to go ahead and implement that into this fiscal year 2015 contract. As well, there's a slight increase just with, their costs at PCEI.
For the benefit of the thousands of people who are watching you on television, why don't you do a short what this program is and what the contract provides?
So the City of Moscow contracts out with the Palouse Clearwater Environmental Institute to help us with our education outreach program. The two main components of this contract are, one, the newsletter that goes out to 11,500 households in the City of Moscow, as well as our education for the classrooms K through 12 in the City of Moscow.
Okay.
I don't have any questions. There's no real changes other than it looks like you're going to be increasing the classroom visits over
Slightly.
14 more, I guess. So I think that we're trying to catch all the bases there, evidently.
And Gary, the increase in the budget over last year is reflected in the 2015 budget we've already seen?
I would ask Les if that's correct. Is Les here? I don't recall that level of detail.
That's why I ask you. I certainly don't.
Thank you very much.
I don't believe that we increased the specific call-out for the PI contract, that amount, but within the conservation line item, I think they're sufficient to cover this minor adjustment. So I think we're fine still within that 15 budget as proposed.
Do we need to call it out to track it?
No, not specifically.
It's a clerical, I guess, if you wanted to do it.
Yeah,
it's probably adjust within that line item if there's a desire to do that before a final.
Yeah, as long as it's contained within that line item, the service is contained within there, the contract dictates. So that'd be fine. We can adjust the narrative.
Take a look at that.
Okay. Anything?
No problems here.
Nicole, a question that I've got, and I may have asked this in previous years, has anyone else ever approached the city about providing these services?
We have not had such inquiries. We did do an RFP, it was a couple years ago, and we had no other takers. So we did try to get some, I guess, contrasting bids, and it just didn't work out. PCI fits that niche. They have their foot in the door with all of the school.
They do Pullman as well, don't they?
I believe so, and they've expanded that program as well. So they just know, I think the teachers know them, trust them, know who to contact, and at this point, they don't have to do a whole lot of extra work to get the schools interested. In fact, they're asking PCEI to add classes, and that's how I was able to add supplementals, because the teachers are asking for more.
Okay. Gary?
Yep.
You look like you had something you wanted to say.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. Consent agenda?
Yes, sir.
Works for me.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Nicole.
Mr. Davis, I see you hiding behind Mr. Palmer back there, so we're going to call your name right off here to come talk to us about Clean Wood Waste Pilot Project. What is this?
Yes, sir.
What does it do and how does it work?
The sanitation department is proposing a one-year pilot project to take place out at the solid waste processing facility beginning October 1, 2014. The proposed project will consist of accepting clean, unpainted, untreated wood and lumber, such as pallets, scrap lumber, and plywood, to be used as compost amendment. This material is currently being landfilled out at the inert demolition landfill at the solid waste processing facility. This pilot project will serve as a beneficial use of these wood waste materials. The wood waste will be processed and used in the same manner as what the green waste and tree branches are currently being used. They'll become amendment out at the compost facility. We have a drop-off down at the recycling center where folks can drop off their lawn waste and tree branches, and that's primarily what that material is used for. And they can haul it out. The commercial haulers can haul it out to the facility as well. The clean wood waste will be processed and chipped with a large tub grinder. Nails and screws can be processed and removed magnetically, but wood waste accepted for this project will be required to be free of all other metals and foreign materials that could damage the grinding equipment.
Other than nails and staples?
Screws, small items like that. Once these materials are processed, they're then blended at about a 5-to-1 ratio by volume with the biosolids that are produced out at the Moscow wastewater treatment plant and composted.
5-to-1 in favor of which of the two components?
The amendment to biosolids is 5-to-1, approximately by volume.
5 parts wood, 1 part.
Correct. Moscow produces about 4,400 wet tons of biosolids annually, and this is approximately 500 tons more per year than what was produced in fiscal year 2010. So additional amendment can be utilized at the compost facility as biosolids tonnages increase. The finished compost produced at the facility is then distributed back to the public free of charge.
How do they get that? Let me interrupt you. If I wanted
they
some
come out with a pickup or a trailer, and they'll just load them with a front-end
out
loader.
at the
Yeah,
transfer station?
yeah,
And the people that want it know about it, I guess?
yeah.
Okay.
We would not anticipate charging a fee for accepting the clean wood waste, and sanitation will monitor the clean wood waste tonnage that is diverted from the waste stream for this project and report back to council, so you folks can evaluate the success of the program and then potential continuation.
Yes, sir.
Tim, as I recall, the biosolids require LSI they charge us a certain per ton for biosolids processing.
Correct.
And that obligates them to obtain amendment, whatever we can't get from our waste program, they need to get to at their expense, correct? So in this case, we would not be charged for this wood waste. Will they be charging us for the pilot program?
It would not change any charges. I mean, it would, instead of going to the inert demolition landfill, it would just be used at the compost facility.
Okay, but then that would create additional amendment for them to
Correct.
mix with the biosolids.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So you need the amendment?
We can use the amendment
And
as biosolids
I know
continue
nothing, I don't have a
to
clue what I'm
increase.
talking about, but you need it or you can use it? Why are we doing this?
Well, we will use it at the composting facility, and there will be a need for it in time as biosolids production increases, as the community grows. This is just one way to get that amendment rather than burying it in a hole.
Yeah, Tim's exactly right. You're diverting it from the waste stream. You're going to reuse it, and that's the positive side of it. But as I just alluded to, LSI needs a certain amount of amendment in order to process the biosolids. So if they can get it from our yard waste and other stuff, in fact, I think one of their proposals was if they need additional amendment, they would get it from Idaho Cedar Sales or somebody like that, bark or something like that to work into it. So depending on the amount of biosolids, the amount of yard waste that's produced per year, they may have need for amendment to reach the optimal mix, or there may be enough produced from within Latah County and the city of
And we take yard clippings and tree limbs and shrub clippings,
Christmas trees.
Christmas trees at the recycle center?
Correct.
Are you going to take this stuff at the recycle center?
No, not initially.
Currently, this product goes over the scales and people are charged from 0 pounds to take it to the landfill. Are we going to have a revenue loss?
Yes.
Any idea how much?
I don't. It's hard to
It'd be
say.
part of the pilot program.
My questions are, I was going to ask about the nails and screws in the pallets, but evidently they've got that figured out. They're not worried about the glues in the plywood or particle or wafer board. That's all okay. And then, does LSI see that much wood coming into the inert there that it would make a big difference?
I would think so. I would think so. I hate to keep alluding to my past profession, but when I was over at Whitman County, we started a program like this about 10 years ago, and it's proven to be highly successful at diverting that material. And they just grind theirs up and sell it to Clearwater Paper for hog fuel, so there are other markets for it as well.
And then the 5-to-1 ratio, that's just, that doesn't matter if it's, they're not wanting enough wood to get the 5-to-1 waste lumber. It's everything. It's not just the waste lumber. It's also
Yard
everything
waste,
that comes in.
yep.
That's
Yep.
counted in that 5-to-1.
Yep.
Okay.
Have you had any requests for this from contractors that would like to find a way to get rid of their waste wood without having to pay going over the scale?
I have not.
Okay. Les?
On the biosolids composting aspect, there is a ratio that we're generally looking for out there in terms of an amendment to the actual biosolids coming from the treatment plant. A large part of what we see is lawn clippings, so it's grass, and that works okay, but you want to get a certain amount of fiber, and the wood waste has a much higher fiber content than you would see out of yard clippings. So it's beneficial from the biosolids perspective in the composting if we can get more fiber into that mix.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons that I think we'd be supportive of the concept as well.
Yes, sir.
I didn't have much. I had the same questions with the nails and things, but other than that, I think it's a good idea just to keep more stuff from going to a hole in the ground, which is a
Right.
total waste, and plus uses up the ground at a faster rate than it would be otherwise.
And we can look at this program after a year's time and see how much of that material is coming across, and if we need to cover some of those costs at that point, we can, revisit that.
I would like to see the revenue expense over the year of the pilot program. It's being presented to us as a pilot program. I'd like for it to be presented to us in a year as a report on the program and a recommendation for
And that's typically the way
to
we've done
continue or
it.
not.
Yeah, virtually every program we've got, except just pickup, has been a pilot program, and the council's looked at, evaluated, and approved it, or declined it at the end of that time. We'll do the same protocol.
I say let's forward it for approval then.
Consent?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep.
Okay, those are the items on the agenda, but we have,
Got one more on the back.
oh, I'm sorry, I flipped the page too soon. I apologize. 6th Street right-of-way. I even talked to Les about this today. You'd think I'd remember. Turn the page too early.
Good afternoon again.
Les McDonald and a strict 6th Street right-of-way acquisition proposal. Faster. I can't do it.
Can't do that faster. Well, thank you. This is an item that has been around for some time. We talked about it, 2, maybe 3 years ago, and there was some discussion with DRA at that time and discussion with administration. And honestly, administration at the time was not as supportive of the concept as I personally would have liked. So we thought, Gary and I have talked about it again, and thought it might be appropriate to bring it back for further discussion at this time and see if there's some interest in perhaps pursuing what we're proposing here. So we'll kind of talk you through a little bit of what that is. This has to do with a button that's not functioning. There it is. There we go. the intersection of 6th Street and Jackson. And to help orient you here, of course, Jackson is the concrete roadway running north-south on this portion, and 6th Street east-west. And this is the Urban Renewal Agency property. On this corner, this is where the new Jimmy John's is going in, on this corner. The item that really is at the heart of this has to do with potential traffic conflicts that occur at this intersection. And those of you that have driven through it are probably very familiar with it, which is the issue of this eastbound interior through lane being directly opposite this westbound left turn lane. And so in essence what we've got here is opposing traffic that are directly opposite each other across an intersection, about 70 feet apart. Now, typically that's not something that you want to do because it creates a situation where there's a lot of potential for conflict of vehicles just basically running into each other in the middle of that intersection. And if it's somebody that is heading eastbound here, and they're anticipating just working their way on across, where somebody turning left here might creep out into the intersection a bit, waiting for that car to pass in that clear spot to go through the gap. They're closing in on an area where they're going to conflict. And so it's a situation that's been around a while, one that frankly we would love to remedy in the Public Works Department. So the proposals that will be before you today are to help remedy that situation. To tell you a little bit of the detail about what's going on, for the right turning lane, which is here, it's a pretty straightforward right turn movement around this corner. If they're making a good legal turn, they're turning into this first lane. Not everybody does that because they tend to want to drift into this east side lane because they're going on to Troy or some point to the east side of Moscow. That's the lane you need to get in, and they tend to get there as soon as they can. So there's a lot of traffic that just kind of makes a nice wide sweeping turn out here into that middle or east side lane. That becomes an issue, as I'll describe in a moment. This is the through movement, as such as it is. It's not very through, it's more of a veer to the right as you're crossing through the intersection. Essentially about a 12 to 14 foot offset to your right over 70-foot distance, which is an extremely sharp taper, one that wouldn't meet any of the design codes today. And while you're doing that, of course, there is the bicycle lane that's doing actually the same thing. If everybody stays where they're supposed to be within that 70-foot distance, that's not too bad for eastbound traffic. But the tendency is, as I mentioned earlier, some people here making this right turn might go a little further out in the intersection before they make that corner. Or somebody heading eastbound here may decide that, I need to get over here. So they start crowding this lane even before you get to the stop bar, and then they start cutting over pretty early because they're avoiding this guy. Well, what happens then is that bicycle lane in the middle gets pinched. And if you've got somebody swinging wide on the turn, somebody else starting the veer, it gets a little narrow and a little tight in there for all of those operations to happen at the same time.
Les, are you aware of any accidents that
I have not
have occurred because of the circumstances you describe, and I'm certainly not suggesting this is a good idea.
Right. It's one thing I have not done is gone back and looked at the last couple years. We did look some years ago, and I believe there had been some. That's something we'll need to pull up again.
In my experience, it's less there than, for some reason, everything seemed to happen on the other side of the street. We have had a couple that we've responded to on the
going westbound.
Most of it's been on the east side from the westbound folk hitting southbound folk, or one or the other.
Right. Well, I know there was a bicycle vehicle accident here quite some time ago where a southbound vehicle ran a light, hit a bike, and put them actually over here in autos. It was something. But yeah, we would have to check the records to see if there's any more current activity there. So we can do that and let you know. So the thought here is that we've got a number of things going on that are problematic in the intersection. It would be helpful to remedy some of that. And there's a couple of possible ways to do that. One of them I don't have drawn up, but we'll talk about because it's something we are going to look at a little further. It's been suggested to us, is the possibility of combining the through lane and the right turn lane again. It was that way once before, so that they are directly opposite this continuation of eastbound traffic lane. And you'd end up with an island out here in the middle, in essence. The challenges with that, as I see it,
Bike lane where it is?
the bike lane would end up being outside of that at the curb line, right? Essentially, you take this configuration here, travel lane, bike lane, and just push it to the curb,
Okay.
right? And then you line up better with the bike lane and the travel lane here. That does solve the issue of opposing directions of traffic. Where I see the downfall in that particular solution is it puts both the right turn lane and through lane in the same lane. So if there's somebody up front that is continuing eastbound, the next guy is wanting to turn right, we've tied up all the right turns that currently can go on red if there's a gap in traffic, which does happen. So now we've got both of those waiting in the queue. The other aspect
What
is...
we used to have at 3rd and Jackson.
What we used to have at 3rd and Jackson some time back, yes. Yes, that's correct. The other issue that comes into play is that bike lane, because if you have a bike lane to the outside of a right turn movement, then there's potential conflict there because the folks waiting to turn right are looking to their left, watching traffic come southbound on Jackson, and then making a right turn without necessarily realizing a bike has come up next to them on their right side. So there's issues there, and so it's one we will look at a little further, just to determine if there really is any viability of that option with today's traffic volumes. And they've changed somewhat since this was put in better than a decade ago. We'll see if anything has changed to the point that that is a viable option. I kind of doubt it, but it is one we'll look at. What I think are probably the two more promising options are what we're going to show you today. And both of these options will require acquisition of additional right-of-way from the URA lot that's located here on the southwest corner of the intersection. The first of these includes the larger right-of-way acquisition, if you will, just a bit over 3,000 square feet. That acquisition would start here and run along what's the back of this red defined sidewalk coming around the corner, and then you can see the green line's the parcel boundary, so it would be something in that area right there.
And green is also the current right-of-way?
That is correct. Parcel boundary and right-of-way are one and the same. And in this case, we would have an island here, as shown in red. The right turn lane would do as it does today, which is essentially you cross the bicycle lane in the dashed zone, come to the curb line, and have a right turn coming on around the corner. This would most likely be a yield control. It could be a stop control, but typically they're yield control in these situations. The bike lane then would continue on next to the through lane as they do today, but they'd be shifted south so that they line up with the lanes across the intersection. So you get a nice straight shot. And just to depict that a little bit, you can see the through lane for the vehicles, the through lane nice and straight, no conflict between the two for the bicycles, and then of course the turning movement removed from that area and pushed off to the south. In this situation, if somebody drifts over here, it occurs so far away from the intersection it doesn't create that conflict. So there's some definite benefit to that. It is the larger amount of land, so there certainly would be more impact on URA parcel if there is interest in selling to the city. That's obviously the first question. But it does resolve a number of issues. Now, there are some concerns that have been raised, and I'll go ahead and point them out. Obviously, there's a bit of land out of the URA parcel that could limit a little bit of what's proposed here. There's some question about the extension of the Hello Walk that's supposed to come through this part of the world and maybe come to this intersection, how this kind of an island configuration would affect that. The Hello Walk under that scenario would terminate right here, because you're essentially at that point onto the regular sidewalk system. So it's something to think about. Would that be in effect or not?
Talk about how eastbound pedestrians along the Otto's property keep going east across the intersection.
Right. They would come down this sidewalk, and they would come to this point and cross. It's depicted right here. It could be there. It could be a little bit further back. In essence, what you're doing then is it's an uncontrolled crosswalk, and you're only dealing with one lane of traffic going one direction. And so you essentially,
They
you
would
would
get out
look to
on-
your left.
Get
you'd
out on
match-
that island.
You'd come out onto the island, and then you would either go eastbound through a crosswalk roughly here, or northbound to a crosswalk there, and wherever you want to
So
go.
you would shift the crosswalk south.
Most likely, that's how it's been shown here. It depends a little bit on where this one would end up, and that is going to be dependent upon, there's some signals and poles in here, and where the crosswalks are located. This one could shift back north a little here as we get into detailed design, and then cross like that. I mean, there's a couple of possibilities. What's here, and it doesn't show up here for the island, but
I guess it is
there's a
pretty
signal
south.
pole right there. There's the shadow of the pole and the mast arm coming out. And then there's a power pole, I believe it is, right next to it. So there's two poles in there, and this little red, or black star in this case, designates where that is located. So we have to work around those poles. That's one of the advantages of the island, though, is that we can leave those poles where they are, and then design the island and crosswalks and lanes appropriately around them. That does, as I say, require a bigger footprint for right-of-way acquisition. The second option, a little smaller footprint, it would be more in the range of about 1,800 square feet. In that case, we would not have an island here at the corner. We would just push the curb line out enough so that things line up. So again, we would have the through lane lining up with the through lane on the east side of the intersection. Same thing with the bicycles, so good parallel route, no conflict between those two. And then the turn lane would do, in essence, what it does today as far as proximity, but because these movements are straight and not doing a veering action, there's less potential for that squeezing of this lane by the vehicles making the corner. So in essence, it takes the configuration today and just shifts it south approximately 12 to 14 feet. Now, the conflict we have here, of course, is the signal pole and the power pole would end up located within what would become that right-hand turn lane. So those would have to be relocated probably to some location here behind the sidewalk. We'd have to pick up a little more easement space back here to accommodate that. That's not in that number, by the way, so like a 10 by 10 space, something like that. And there would be obviously a cost of relocating those facilities to that new home. So
Which way are the power lines running on that power pole right there?
Judging from the next.
believe they're
shadow, it's probably
north-south.
north-south.
Yeah, because
There's
if you look
different
here, you
shadows.
see the crossbuck here, so that would be a north-south run this direction. There may also be an east-west in there, looking at that one, so it may go both
You've got an
directions.
east-west over on the bank side, maybe.
That one's a luminaire. That's a north-south pole. That one right there would be an east-west. So I think we've probably got a crossing here, looks like.
If you drop the power pole to the south,
Yes,
you've got an alignment problem and a guying situation to be addressed.
that would have to be addressed as well, yes, which is honestly why the island option is preferred by my staff and I, because we don't have to relocate those. We don't have to make a change in the power lines or change the mast arm and the pole. Hopefully, if we did go with this option, we could just reuse the pole and mast arm. That's something we have not looked at yet, but we would have to consider whether or not that mast arm would be long enough to reach out across the roadway
needs to be.
at its new location. It's possible that we might have to go to a longer mast arm, which if that was all, that wouldn't be too bad. As you do that, though, you add weight, which then might require a larger pole to carry the weight. So those are the details we have to work our way through in a design process, determine what exactly would be required for an improvement here. But the intent today really is just kind of test the waters, if you will, committee and council, to see if there is a willingness on the part of the committee and council for the staff to pursue discussions on this. We would look further at what the right-of-way needs would be, probably start with some thoughts about potentially what improvements might cost, and then obviously start discussions with the URA representatives about the possibility of acquiring some additional space.
Is your cross-hatched area out in the center of 6th Street paint?
That would
In
be
both-
paint.
In both cases, you're not proposing any curbs or median or anything?
At this time, is proposed as paint. There could potentially be an island there if we thought there would be a benefit to pedestrian crossings, but because it's a signalized intersection, I don't think that would necessarily be the case. So most likely would stay with paint. And there are the two, side by side, if you will. The first option, the larger volume, or the larger area here at the top with the island, and then the more compact site, if you will,
I
to the
asked
south.
Les to split screen this for a purpose. It appears that the differences lie south of the bike lane, that the bike lane south edge hits the curb in both drawings.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's true.
So the car lanes and the bike lane are close to identical in either case.
And the reason for that is, of course, we're targeting these easterly lanes
Just wanted-
across, so
just wanted to
that's
make-
consistent. You're
Make
correct.
the point that that's really not any difference between the two. The difference has to do with the way the sidewalk works,
Yes.
with the way the lane works.
Whether or not you have an island and an island
Yeah,
extending out here. In this case, you have it. In this case, you don't.
Pole and the problems of the poles and what you can and can't do with them, and
Correct.
unless I would put the ped crossing you've got drawn off, coming off the corner of the building that's now gone in the upper photo,
Mm-hmm. Right here.
I would think it would shift back to the left.
That would be my inclination as well.
And bring, so they're not bringing them into the poles, you're bringing
Right.
them west of the poles.
To the poles.
And then they line up better with the other side of Jackson Street.
I
Yeah,
think most of your pedestrian
But
traffic
I'm just
is going to
sitting here
be
designing.
going east rather than south as well, so that
I think
makes sense
that's
to
true.
have that straighter shot there.
Right, and what will be the determining factor in the end is what's the width here that we have to work with for an island space, because you do have to accommodate the accessibility. So either it's a ramp or it's a cut-through, depending. In this kind of an island, probably a ramp, so you've got to have sufficient width or depth for the ramp and then the landing at the top without running off the north end. But, yeah, those are the things that, as we would get into detailed design and look at exactly how much space we have and where everything's located, we'd pin down the location of those crossings and those ramps.
I think it's something that really needs to be done just because visitors to town have a heck of a time at that intersection and you're lined up with oncoming traffic, especially at night when the sun's gone and it's kind of like headlights back and forth, what a mess. But it seems like we're working on insufficient information about the incremental costs of the larger land acquisition versus the small versus the turning traffic versus how much does it cost to move a signal in a power pole? Is it possible even without the guy wire issue that you brought up? So I think it's something that we should pursue, but more information.
Well, it's not just the poles, it's the fact that your construction cost is going to be greater because you're going to be paving more right turn lane in one than in the other.
Plus an island,
Your
yes.
curb length is longer in one than the other. All kind of variables.
And certainly what we can do, the idea here was just sort of test the waters to see, because if we're told at this stage that really we have no interest, then we'll direct our staff to go elsewhere. But if there is potential interest here, then we'll work with the engineering division to start looking at, okay, what kind of costs might we be seeing with respect to infrastructure and potential right-of-way cost, and we can bring those numbers back and talk further. But I just wanted to at least get an initial thought here.
I think that we've got interest, but yeah, it's
Sure.
just a matter of where we're, what's our total bill going to be with either one? An estimate of some sort would be great. I don't know why Don's here, but
Yeah, I have no idea either why Don is here.
got the URA.
What,
app.
accident
An
info
accident information,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's-
sure, we'd pull that up as well.
would not be determining, but would
Crash
be,
data.
would be interesting.
Right. Well, the other
It
thing
may
we
be
can
one of
do-
those cases where the thing is so deadgum dangerous, everybody's really careful and nobody hits anybody.
And that can happen as long as people are aware of it, obviously. But the other thing we can do here is, we do have a traffic model now of the city, And so we could run some different scenarios through that, like the combined lane, for instance, versus a split lane like these options, and assess that as well to see what the viability of those are.
And when you're looking at the accident statistics, it might be nice just to push back a block further west, because that's when the lanes are crossing bike paths and things like that, and see what happens just a little further off, too.
Yeah, we'll look at the area.
Don, I'm afraid to ask.
URA, I bet.
It is. Gary may address this as well. The URA's interest in this is to purchase this lot was $510,000 when they purchased the lot for the Hallow Walk, and then the remaining 2 parcels, if there are on either side of the walk, then we need to address egress and ingress into those lots. How that's done, I don't know if Les has considered that, but it doesn't appear that the westerly lot would have any way to get into that. And I think that was discussed by Jeff Jones when he was here when we first seen these two aspects. So from that perspective, there'd be concern about whether or not we need to have that and still be able to sell those 2 lots. So that was the goal of the URA when they purchased this lot originally.
The westerly lot, meaning
Well, at some point,
meaning where
Essentially,
where that large.
kind of more of a shape sort of like that, generally speaking.
Is this the,
Green button.
so there's going to be a Hallow Walk crosses here, and the goal was to sell this lot and divide those 2 out separately. And then so there would be, and chime in here, Gary, if you think.
You could
There's
write
some egress and
in
egress.
off of 6th.
If that's a concern I would have with Les when they do the design aspects of that, is to look at that, so they can still sell those 2 lots.
You could write in off of 6th, and you would write in off of Jackson into the.
If the state
What's
lets
your-
us.
Well, there
Right
are
now,
some
also-
driveways on Jackson already, so it's
Yeah, there's
Likely
an
they'd get
easement here
retained.
that's actually owned by
Anderson.
the Andersons here, that is their easement, and when it was Otis, they had access through that easement. I'm not sure that.
Autos.
Autos, excuse me.
I think there's a curb. Les, there's a curb cut on the
There is.
URA property too, isn't there?
There are several on this property. Jackson near the south end, I think south of the pole. I believe there's one right there,
There are 2 on the Jackson Street side.
and there's one about here. The voice in my ear is telling me. And I think there, historically, way back, there may have been a little access here, but that one's problematic, just proximity to the intersection, similar to what we ran into on the Jimmy John's here not too long ago. So you'd probably look at something back in here under either scenario, as far west as possible, just to get it away from the intersection.
Gary, please.
Well, echoing Don's concerns, there was a purpose for purchasing this lot. Yes, it is an opportunity to make a problematic intersection perhaps a little less problematic. When this was looked at 2 or 3 years ago, leadership at that time, and it was not directly from my office either, was that the intersection worked, and perhaps it was as people were careful because it was a little bit problematic. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to make it safer. If you could go back to the island, or the split screen, that would be.
Split. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, if you look at the 2, we're not just out to move traffic. We are out to enhance pedestrian and bicycle access as well. The island does help vehicular traffic, no doubt about that. Does make bicycle traffic at least as good as it is now, perhaps a little better, but is very problematic for pedestrian traffic. Islands, as we've seen around town, are typically not kept up very well. They tend to be places for accumulation of trash. They can be safe areas for pedestrians to wait to cross, but it is essentially a block. And access to that lot, as Don alluded to, would be much reduced. The sight line up to the University of Idaho, which is what we intended to enhance when the council approved the Legacy Crossing URA plan, it would actually work at opposite of that type of amenity. So the island, I believe, is something that and in my preliminary discussions as acting as interim director for the URA, preliminary discussions with the board are that the island is not preferred at all, mainly because it really restricts pedestrian access, makes it cumbersome. As far as the lower design, Les and I have talked about that. Certainly that's something that can be discussed, but clearly the top island is a vehicular, solely a vehicular access issue.
Be it bicycle or car.
Exactly. So in our mind, that seriously detracts from the plan and reduces pedestrian accessibility.
I guess when you come back with this too, maybe have something, maybe from kitty corner across the street, looking up that direction so we can kind of see what we're talking about when we're talking about moving that hello walk up through there.
And if I may follow up, and Gary and I have not talked about this one aspect, so I'm going to differ in opinion slightly from him. When it comes to pedestrian crossings, typically a shorter crossing is preferred. And in this situation, an island actually does create shorter crosswalks across this intersection as compared to the southerly, or the bottom option, if you will. It's particularly the 6th Street on the west side becomes a much shorter crosswalk. It breaks it up, in essence, into pieces. And generally in the industry, the studies have shown that that is a preferred way to go because it does allow people to get across the street in a shorter amount of time. And if they're a slower pedestrian, they feel comfortable that they can make it versus a longer crosswalk that the southerly one, or the bottom one here, would create. So,
Well, and speaking
The bottom one, I see all of those students headed downtown. You may need something out there to herd them into the crosswalk to keep them from just going the shortest distance. I mean, it's what you've drawn at least is pushing them really south.
in experience, when you're going east on that southern sidewalk, you know, not all those right turners are necessary. I mean, like you say, they're looking up the hill to at traffic that's coming to them, and not looking at, you know, especially when it's a green and you've got a walk sign, they're not necessarily looking for me. I mean, I'm hard to miss, but.
Well, I'm thinking about the island at Stadium Way and the Pullman Highway over at Wazoo, and the number of people who use that as a springboard to go across a light red just because it makes it shorter, and so they're more prone to leap out across there.
Can happen.
It goes both ways.
If I may.
Yes, sir.
And I will yield to Les's expertise as far as road design. However, I will say that for an amenity and a way to tie this area together in an urbanized, pedestrian-friendly atmosphere, because what we're trying to do is enhance that sort of back and forth. An island in the middle of a major intersection in the middle of the city looks clearly like it is more of a roadway than it is an inviting pedestrian access.
Isn't there an island there at Main and Grand in Pullman? Is there, or is it just, there's that right turn?
Right by Rico's.
Yeah, so
Yes.
that's kind of what I mean, this is a little bit bigger than that, but that's what I envision. And, you know, you're looking at an urban, and I don't know that it's.
You're also looking at an oblique angled intersection, which is different from this.
Very oblique, yeah.
So again, I'm certainly the URA at this point has no opposition to making this a safer intersection. We just would like to continue the discussions to try and minimize the blockages, if you will, or the deterrence to good pedestrian access.
Well, this is just your first try. I mean, who's to say
Certainly.
what's going to cut, what can
Right.
come up?
And these are all good points, and you know, I think what I'm hearing here is that there's interest in looking further. So we will.
I think you've got us interested.
Okay, very good. So we can do that, and we'll look at some of the items, or all the items that have been raised here, and bring back more information.
I mean, you're not affecting the traffic and the biking. Either design works the same.
I think it enhances it.
You know, your eastbound
Yeah,
Sixth
it
Street is
fixes the
identical.
issue, right.
Your
right.
biking is identical, they line up.
Mhm.
It's got to do with that right turn lane, how much land you're taking, the cost of building it all.
Exactly.
And it may come down to money. I mean, if you end up with $1,000 for one and 29,000 for the other one, it may get real easy real quick. Or not. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we can do reports. Elisa has some information for us about the new HUD, low to moderate income percentage numbers for Idaho's counties, cities, and census tracts. I trust you're not going to read them all to us.
Good afternoon.
Because there are a lot of them.
I have some good and bad news today. The HUD statistics were just released on the 25th of June, correct? And previously, Moscow had been just under 51% low to moderate income. And the new statistics came out, and we are at 53.65. So, I mean, that's not something to jump up and down about, but it does give
Tell us why we care.
That's where I'm headed.
And what constitutes low to moderate?
It's a variable of three different, there's low, moderate, and then low to moderate income. And it's based on the census data. And they switched it to the American Community Survey that did not collect all of the same data as they previously had. So this information would have been released probably 2 or 3 years ago versus just now coming out. And I think Walter has some more background information on that also. He's worked with this program for a long time.
Well, the reason it's announced as new HUD, low to moderate, is it ties it to HUD, among other things, block grant money. And certain rules for block grants for cities require greater than 51% low and moderate income in the community asking for the grant money. I don't want to steal your thunder. Go ahead and finish.
Walter's actually been working with this program a lot. I used to work with it, but we haven't been eligible, so I haven't gotten to work with it for a long time.
weren't 51% low and moderate income.
Right. And so now that we are, it opens the door for us to be able to apply for some different grant funding through the Idaho Department of Commerce under their community programs. And just to kind of give you an idea of those programs, there's the Public Facilities Grant, which is water, sewer, streets, sidewalks, fire stations, fire engines, youth, child care centers, those types of things. And then economic development grants, also which are tied to job creation. And you can also look at the downtown revitalization. All of them have a little bit different requirements under them, but they have that key element that you have to be over 51% low to moderate income. They had previously capped the funding at $350,000. It previously, for many, many years, had been $500,000, and I have heard that they may move it back up to $500,000, but
They are.
they are, okay. So we will have a workshop in September, which they'll give us our new handbooks, and we'll do our new grant certifications, and so I'm sure they'll release that publicly at that time. So we can submit for public facilities once a year. We can submit an application, and you do have to have a substantial completion of one project before you can apply for another. Economic development grants, you can. There's 4 different deadlines a year on those for the infrastructure program. And then downtown revitalization is once a year right before Thanksgiving. And for the community and senior centers, the deadlines are in the first Friday of March, I think it is. And so this will open us up to do some more things in areas that we need the money with our infrastructure and our water and sewer and those types of things. But so I'm looking forward to this. This is actually one of the programs that does pay for grant administration. You can also use it for in-kind. And One of the negatives, though, is that all the construction is Davis-Bacon, which is the prevailing wage job, so that does add to the project. You can put a project together, though, where your grant funding pays for engineering and design and some things, so you can avoid that. There's procurement guidelines that go along with that you have to be very careful about. One of the benefits that we have is that I'm in-house. Most of the other communities have to procure out their administration, which is what Councilman Steed has been doing for many, many years. And so, sorry, do you have a question?
We've gotten block grants in the past. I believe, Gary, a block grant with the elevator in this building.
Yes.
Because,
Elevator and a lot of the infrastructure of this building.
Yeah, because at that time it was a senior citizen
Yes.
Facility. You've also used it at the 1912 building.
There's been three grants there, but under the senior center category.
Under the senior citizen center, which they are presumed to be 100% LMI. And then we used one for the Friendship Square 12 years ago,
Yes.
15 years ago, and that was a downtown project based upon slum and blight, which is 3 types of infrastructure that are in need of repair. And then before that, we did one for low-income housing on White Avenue. We extended White Avenue from Mountain View out to the low-income housing to the
Incubator.
and then before that, the incubator building down on Sweet Avenue. So it's not that we haven't gotten HUD block grants, but we've never been citywide eligible, where Tyler and Les could come rolling into Alyssa and saying, we could really use another $500,000 to pave between walk and don't walk.
I heard fire trucks.
And you
Yes.
did
Fire
hear
trucks
fire
are
trucks.
available as well.
Yeah.
And we could possibly, depending upon, and I thought of this today, the county can apply and the city can both apply jointly. If we were to do a city-rural combination, we could maybe double the funding availability on that project. We just have to see how it would be structured, so.
New opportunities.
Yeah, we haven't been LMI since the early 90s, late 80s, so it does provide some additional opportunities.
And we will have this designation, it could be 10 years from now, we'll see. I don't know if they'll release, it should be, every 10 years that they update them, but as I said, we didn't get the HUD statistics from the last census until 4 years into it. So we'll at least have probably another
Good for 6.
6 years to do
So
this.
where is the cutoff on moderate income? Is that per capita income? How do they measure that, and what is it?
I'm not exactly sure how the calculation works now. There's statistics by county and city that they publish. Do you know the calculation, how it works?
It's more than just income. They look at
Yeah.
other factors, and
Poverty level.
it really doesn't, for Alyssa and I's purposes of writing these grants, we really don't care. You either are or you aren't. And it's, to my knowledge, not that appealable, if at all. And if you are, you can, and if you aren't, you can't, and that's just the story. So I've only been doing this for 25 years and never cared enough to go ask them, how do you do it? Just what's the number?
It's just kind of like disconnect between low and moderate income and, it's not really income.
I do know that in virtually every case, I know of one town that won't, virtually every case, if you go out and survey door to door and ask people what their income is based upon their family size, they will come in with a higher low to moderate income number than what the census says the community is. And we finally figured that out was because they were using other factors and data for the numbers she's talking about. Where we survey, we just ask income, period. We don't talk about
So we'll just
ownership of
call
property or anything,
So we'll just call it peas and walnut shells for our purposes.
for all practical purposes.
I did have Bill actually map the census tract information for me based upon the percentages that they provided, and it wasn't what we anticipated it to be for certain areas, so it was kind of interesting. So anyhow, you will see us bringing projects forth to you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Palmer, you want to talk about downtown banners, I
I
understand.
figure we don't do that enough. We ought to do it some more. All right. We're here to talk just briefly about the banner program. You'll recall that we brought some updates last fall before the council for the banner program, and in December of last year, the council approved the updates to the banner program, which included a banner map that we would update periodically as need be, with the goal of the banner program just to be
Like Nicole, I'm going to have to ask you to explain to the millions of people watching this a little bit of what is the banner program, what are you talking about here?
Our banner program deals with several different banners now, more so now than it did a little while ago. We have 3 additional banners that are now primarily farmers market banners. This banner program dealt with the Overstreet banner on Main Street and the banners that are on the pole banners that are primarily in the downtown core.
Okay.
It's a way that we try to show a vibrant downtown, to have the city logo, have some historic district banners, university banners, and so the banner program was put together so that we would have a means to organize the banners and designate what we wanted where. So we would have some organization. So we could say, this is a good area for university banners, this is a good area for city banners, etc. Since the approval, we have had one minor update made to the banner map. That update dealt with intersections on Main Street between 1st Street and 8th Street. At the intersections, we updated the map to include there were 4 banners that we wanted included at each intersection, one being the university, the city, the chamber, and historical banner, so that we could show the entities and the cooperation of the entities at each intersection throughout downtown. So that update was made, and we changed the banner map. We still don't have all of the banners manufactured to implement the entirety of the banner program, but those changes were made to the map.
What was the program as approved by the council in December for those intersections?
The intersections just had a City of Moscow historic district, and I don't think there was a University of Idaho banner on every street corner.
And there were event banners in several of those locations.
So we met with Chris Murray, who was still at the University of Idaho at that time, another staff member, the chamber director, Gina Truccio, and at that point, part of the issue is we're still embarking on the branding campaign that some of you have been involved in, most notably Walter from the beginning. We're not sure what the banners will look like at this point. We have City of Moscow banners that you've seen on alternating on College Street. So we really weren't going to move ahead too far out into this until we find out what the results of that that branding program are going to be. However, that being said, because of the immediacy of having something on Main Street, from 1st Street down to 8th Street, we proposed those 4 banners, one on each corner, so that exposure.
But you got, what, 4 intersections really that you're doing?
It would be
first,
7,
third.
actually. 1st, 2nd, 3rd.
4th, 5th, 6th.
No, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Yeah, because 4th is Friendship Square.
Right.
So the idea was that that's something that we could do almost immediately. The University of Idaho has some banners manufactured, and of course the banner program as approved by the council at that time, they're free to populate those banners about any time they want. We couldn't see spending the money on banners if our brand is going to change somewhat. So this was a kind of I'm not going to say an interim measure, but the inclusion of the chamber was something that was not proposed to you at the beginning of this process.
I guess my whole deal was, from the beginning of this was, we don't necessarily want Jazz Festival banners up into May and Rendezvous banners up clear into December, that type of thing. That's
a problem we had in the past.
Right.
Exactly.
Right now it seems like we're getting a better job of rotating things through. And
that's something that through the process we tried to make it easier for event banners and also provide flexibility where we had things to fill in so that we don't have it feel like a ghost town when there's not an event, so that there are banners at key locations.
So, Gary, the fact that the council approved this in December, are y'all back here today asking for this change to be put before council for approval? I'm a little confused about what our process needs to be.
Well, we certainly can bring it back to council. When we brought it to you initially, the map itself was something that would not have required additional council approval. That was part of the policy.
But you brought it as such, did you not?
Today,
No, in December.
we brought it to you as what it was, but that changes could be made, and those did not need to come back to council. If you look in the downtown banner policy and procedures,
We approved the policy.
the reason,
Okay.
the reason that we did that, Walter.
I'm not
if you
trying to
were-
make it hard,
No,
I'm just
that's
trying to
fine.
understand it.
Yeah, and the reason we did that.
Because I admittedly missed that council meeting,
Oh, okay.
so.
What the issue was we have a farmer's market map that has to be approved by the council every time there's any change, and that's become somewhat cumbersome. Now, understanding that the farmer's market has a lot of moving parts and different dynamics, there's probably a pretty good reason for that, because the council's going to hear about it no matter what. In this situation, if, say, for instance, the university came in and said, we really aren't seeing getting a lot of comments about banners here, we'd like to take those down, we might fill those with city banners. Or they may say, God, can you give us one or two more poles along here? A lot of our traffic goes along there. That may be something that we'd want to do without having to come back to the council every time we switch something out. Admittedly, though, Walter, I will tell you that the chamber banners were not something that had originally been discussed. However, it seemed, if we're trying to build that relationship downtown, that since you had Historic District, City of Moscow, University of Idaho, you still have one corner that we could either have put an event banner in, or we could have put a semi-permanent chamber banner in just along there. There's no other chamber banners proposed anywhere else within the city.
The chamber director is doing everything behind you except dancing with pom-poms, so,
I love this.
So this is just a report, you're not asking for any council action or moving anything to council?
No, if you guys are comfortable with it, if you think this rises to the level that you want to see it again, happy to put it on council for Monday.
I'm not suggesting it does, now that you've explained it. I remember Dan's comment, we I don't know if it started with this, but somebody came in and pointed out that we had banners up all over the place that had been out of date for 6 months or more.
Right.
And so that's when we got Tyler's department much more in the banner business than he probably ever wanted to be, but
Yeah, we started a banner revision actually back in 2010. Teresa, who was still working here, did an inventory. It was part of our trying to get things organized that hadn't up to that point been organized. And so when that came up, we actually had a base plan that we proposed, and that was one of the reasons that the map has gone through so many revisions, and a lot of times it's really minor revisions. It's, on pole U24, it's not as good a pole because it's in a tree. We want to move it to U31, and we didn't. So we wanted to approve the program, but allow the flexibility to make minor changes to the map itself, with the idea that if there was anything of significance that we felt ought to be looked at, that we would bring that back, but with minor map changes that we would make
I
those.
think that if y'all were to start, Gina pops up with enough money to buy 8,000 banners, and all of a sudden every pole in town's got a chamber banner, we'd probably want to be aware of it
I
before it happens.
suspect that's true.
Yeah.
I would also note this is a great time to thank Grop Electric, Frontier Communications has helped us on occasion, Tyler's crew, to help put these things up, because as you can see, there are a lot of installations.
Takes a village of bucket
They
trucks.
may go a little quickly, but there's a lot of them.
You bet.
Yeah, it takes some time.
And I think maybe even Parks and Rec will be pressed into service at some point.
You're getting Dwight a bucket truck?
Dwight, he's already got a bucket truck.
Oh, my gosh.
We just sold one to the school district, so maybe we can get them down.
There we go,
too.
let's get another helper.
Tyler, what's the lifespan on these banners looking like? We're not going to end up with these really great banners looking like they're faded and worn and tattered and after the battle for the fort or something, are they?
The banners are very susceptible to their location. If they're in a south-facing location, and if they're in an area where they act as a sail for the westerly winds, then they're far more susceptible to getting beat up. If they're in the shade of a tree, they can last for a long, long time. typical lifespan, I would say on average, before they get looking pretty tattered, we probably get 5 to 7 years out of a banner before they get looking too bad.
Not all.
So they're pretty durable. They're really not too bad.
And somebody's paying attention? As
Yeah.
in, I mean, I'm not suggesting you weekly drive around and look, but somebody's paying attention and says, hey, the banner at so-and-so is ripped loose at the bottom, we need to go put a new one up.
Yeah, we perform an annual inventory on all of the permanent installation banners as part of our inventories that we do throughout the winter. So we'll do an inventory and just take a look at the brackets, make sure everything's tight, and check the banners. And then as people are through town, those are things that we get called on pretty frequently. They'll say, hey, this banner's dangling here, or this one isn't on there. And
Anything else?
Sounds like we got a plan.
All right.
Stick around for a bit afterwards, so.
That it on that one?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Tyler. Mr. Curtis, I knew you were here for a reason, sir.
It's Dr. Curtis to you.
Yes, that's Dr. Curtis. A report on the Youth Scholarship Program.
Hey, you got it.
Alrighty, well, we were asked to give a status report on where the Youth Scholarship Fund is at this time, and we used the 25th of this month as our base, and a little bit of comparisons here to last year at the same time. As you'll recall, the policy, we need proof of need. It's required now. A parent, a caregiver is the one that requests a scholarship. City residency is required except for any donations or grants that aren't specified. There's a limit of 200 a person, 500 a family, program cap of 18,000, and that we were supposed to cover this through the budget process, and we have. And the proof of need, we have the free or reduced lunch program, the electronic benefit transfer, supplemental nutrition assistance program, and the women, infants, and children's program. So most of these are pretty standard across the country. And the top numbers, total revenues, remember we had 18,000 budgeted, so with donations and grants, we have 22,608.
This is 12 months ended July 25?
No, it's since
This fiscal year?
Yeah, just this fiscal year.
So this is not 12 months?
No.
No, it's just since October
October
1st
1
of last year.
Of 13 to the 25th of July?
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Three quarters, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so far, we have $17,191 in funds that we've expended. On the revenues, of course, we had the 18,000 in the budget. 3,608 were just donations, and 1,000 was specific to swim lessons that came from the swim club. And it was also designated as resident or non-resident. They didn't care. And then down on the expenses, we've used $13,394 of the city's budget, leaving $4,600. On the non-resident general, spent about $35,500 with $65 left, and that was zeroed out here just about a week ago, but somebody had withdrawn from our program, so it came back, so we actually ended up with a little bit. And then donors for the swim lessons, we've only used 254 of that, so there's still 745 left out of that.
Why would that not be used up rather quickly? Right?
I don't know. Last year,
Not getting requests, was the money not donated early enough?
no,
Or
it
you're
was
not
donated in
getting-
plenty of time. We just the need is different. Last year, if you'll recall, we had that huge run, and we put the $18,000 cap on, and suddenly there was no money, so the swim club jumped in with that money at the last minute, which saved a lot of people from missing out on it. This year,
Everybody knows how to swim now.
yeah, everybody knows how to swim. We just didn't have the requests.
Okay.
So, Doesn't mean the program suffered. We've been full. I mean, the program.
Yeah, that was my question, I guess. Have we seen a drop in program use across, in any of it, or?
Well, yes.
Okay.
And now we didn't do a thorough review here. This was just an update. When we get to October, when we're into the when it's all done, we can give you a really thorough rundown. But one of the interesting things that we found right off, I mean, it just stood right out, and that was in the youth camps program, and that they were short about 10 kids. It's not very many kids, but if you remember last year, they were 10 kids using the entire summer worth of money. So I mean, that just drained the program, and those 10 did not attend at all this year, using by the actual names of the people. So it. I don't know if that was just, we don't know the specifics of why and all that, but it is there. So it was just kind of an interesting stat that stood out.
Yeah, I don't think the why is any of our business. It's just that was my curiosity, is if the fact that we put a cap on it and had a proof of need deal with it, that if that changed.
The proof of need and the proof of need seems to be the biggest thing, and also the caps. And some of those folks, I mean, they needed their kid in something for the entire summer. It wasn't worth that to them in a lot of cases to just have them there for a week, where last year they had the entire summer taken care of. So they had to figure out what else to do with their kid for the year. Yeah.
Mr. Radner.
Yeah, I would know, and I'm gratified to see that we still have a balance in the swim lessons. You recall when this came up last year, there was some concern that by cutting back the scholarship program, that some children might not be able to learn to swim. So it's nice to see that money is available and there if anybody needs it.
And I think we have one more round of lessons to go. So.
Okay.
Resident to non-resident usage at this time last year had 107 residents. This year 178 non-residents, the 55 to 37, and you can see the totals. What's really interesting is that you have a lot. We're serving more people this year. They're just not spending as much money.
But there's more people getting a chance to use it then, because.
Yes.
It's not all getting used up.
Yes, and if you remember last year, just prior to putting the $18,000 gap on there, well, right about that time, we were already capped out, and we turned away, I believe it was about 25 families at that time, because we were out of money. And then the donations started coming in. I don't know how many of those were part of those that took advantage of it later, but yeah.
And it appears we're giving possibly a little less money to more people.
Yes. It's more people.
That's how I'd see it.
Yes, sir.
Dwight, if I may, it seems to me, if my recollection is correct, the 37 non-resident users last year proportionally were using more than the 55 non-resident users this year.
Yeah.
Yes.
By quite a percentage, as I recall.
Yeah, and that's what sparked the whole let's get down and look at this thing, because the non-residency part, or the non-residents, were overwhelming the rest of the program.
Okay.
And just for interest, you can see this is where these broke down. Nobody's using SNAP, but school lunch, EBT, and WIC are the primaries.
Are people that are on SNAP also in the other programs possibly? And
could very well be.
And that just happens to be the card they gave you?
Could very well be. And another interesting one, 78 new requests, only 28. And these are families, by the way. Not individuals.
So 78 families you've not seen before.
Yeah. And the denied, that's not really a very good number. That's because there's a lot of people that no doubt did not apply that knew about the program, just didn't ask. These were people that asked, and were told that they could not. And the reasons were various. Didn't qualify. Yeah.
Okay.
And the best of it all, here are the folks of our donations and grants. The anonymous, I can tell you, we've got a weird phenomenon going down on at the Herc, in that people will go to the concession stand and they'll buy something and they don't want their change, and we're talking a penny, a nickel, sometimes a quarter. These are kids. So the staff's just been putting that into a cup, and when she's got a few bucks, they put it in a donation anonymous to the program. So
I like the change that was $1,000.
yeah.
Good week.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah, and I don't have with me where that is from, but that one was not change. And I think that one, they asked specifically not to have their name mentioned.
You thanked them profusely, I hope.
Oh, yeah. We send letters so that they can get their tax write-offs on it, too. So there you go. I believe that was it. That was
And you
it.
only, of the donor list, you only had one that was restricted? The one for the swim lessons?
One restricted donor.
It was restricted to swim lessons,
Right.
but not residency or non-residency.
That's what I mean.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Program restricted.
Program
Yes.
restricted.
Correct. Program restriction. And
All right, anything else?
Looks like it's working. I mean, I'm glad we're serving more people, even though if
More
it might be
families.
less for them. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Dwight.
All right. Thank you.
I have nothing further, sir.
Do you?
Yeah, I don't have anything further unless you do.
I do not. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.